Imagine being a corporation so powerful that you not only dominate the market, but are capable of dictating the energy policies of an entire country. For 6 consecutive years, being recognized as America's most innovative company. Its executives, Kenneth and Jeffrey Skilling, were treated as untouchable visionaries, and its stock price seemed to defy gravity. I am Polibio, and today we will look at the most audacious corporate fraud in modern history. It all started as a very carefully structured facade, behind the glass doors in Houston, Texas. There was no solid financial empire. There was a labyrinth of corporate simulation, creative accounting, and a legal void so massive that it ended up evaporating $74 billion. How did they manage to deceive investment banks, auditing firms, and federal regulators? And most disturbingly, how is it that the architecture of this fraud was, in its origin, technically legal? To understand how this mirage was built, we must look at its architects. The story of Enron didn't start with corporate fraud, but with steel pipes and natural gas. In 1985, Kenneth, an economist with deep political connections in Washington, orchestrated the merger of 2 boring pipeline companies, Houston Natural Gas and Internorth. That is how Enron was born. Wasn't a common criminal. He was a master lobbyist. He understood a fundamental economic concept before his competitors. Deregulation. If he could get the government to stop controlling energy rates, prices would fluctuate freely. And where there is volatility, there is an opportunity to profit. But moving physical gas was slow, expensive, and required heavy maintenance. This is where the second piece of the disaster enters, Jeffrey Skilling. Hired in 1990 from the prestigious consulting firm McKinsey, Skilling brought a radical philosophy. He believed Enron didn't need to own real physical assets to dominate the market. His vision was to turn the company into a sort of stock exchange for energy. Skilling didn't just change the business model. He changed the psychology of the company. He established a ruthless corporate culture based on pure social Darwinism. He implemented a review system where, every year, the bottom 15% of employees were mercilessly fired. In this hyper-competitive environment, the only rule for survival was to generate profits at any cost. And to achieve this, Skilling conditioned his entry into the company on a single accounting demand, that Enron abandon traditional accounting and adopt the mark-to-market method. That was the exact moment the company stopped operating in macroeconomic reality and began operating in fiction. In standard accounting practice, revenue is recorded as services are executed and real liquidity flows in. But mark-to-market allowed Enron to record the projected profits of a long-term contract the exact moment it was signed. A perfect example was their deal with Blockbuster in the year 2000 to provide video on demand. The technology didn't even work. The project was an absolute failure, but Enron booked over $110 million in estimated profits on their financial statements for that quarter. The money didn't exist, but the profit was already on the books, artificially inflating the company's value to Wall Street. However, printing profits on paper inevitably collides with reality. Eventually, a company needs operating cash flow to survive. When Enron's true projects began to bleed hundreds of millions in losses, the board of directors faced an absolute crisis. They lacked liquidity, but if they reported the insolvency, the market would destroy their stock. This is where the story takes a dark turn into structural evasion. To hide the liabilities, Chief Financial Officer Andrew Fastow designed a network of hundreds of special-purpose entities with code names like Chuco, LJM, and Raptor. These were shell companies, fictitious partnerships controlled by Enron itself, exploiting the loose accounting rule of the era. If one of these entities had at least 3% of outside investor capital, it did not have to be consolidated on the parent company's balance sheet. Enron quietly transferred its massive debts and toxic assets to these off-balance sheet entities. In the eyes of the market, Enron's financial statement was immaculate. In reality, they were hiding a black hole leveraged on a bubble. Arthur Andersen, one of the most prestigious auditing firms in the world, was tasked with certifying these financial statements. But they made more money offering consulting services to Enron than auditing them. The gatekeepers decided to look the other way to protect their fees. By mid-2001, the lack of liquidity caused the bubble to burst. When pressure forced the executives to restate years of false financial reports, the house of cards collapsed. Enron shares, which once traded at over $90, plummeted to 26 cents. Thousands of employees lost their jobs and their retirement funds, while the top executives had already quietly cashed out millions of dollars months earlier. What you see on the news are just the symptoms of the collapse. The real story, the one almost nobody reads, is always hidden in the footnotes of financial statements and the loopholes of corporate law. What they don't tell you, what they hide to keep the public in the dark, you will find here. I am Polibio, and I bid you good night.